Hello, friends. Welcome to Soft History Stories. Today, we'll tell you stories of the corset, but not how beautiful they were. It was how these corsets used to kill medieval women's bodies. It was a time when beauty came at a price one that women were willing to pay, even if it meant suffocating under the weight of society's expectations. The corset, that once revered symbol of elegance and status, clung to their bodies like a second skin, tightening, shaping, and molding them into the image of perfection. But behind the tightly laced fabric lay a silent truth. The cost of beauty was far higher than anyone had imagined. As the days wore on, the very thing that promised grace became a prison, leaving women to bear not just the physical scars, but the emotional toll of fitting into a world that demanded so much. This is the story of that struggle, the struggle to conform, to be admired, and the legacy of those who paid the price for perfection. The torches flicker along the stone walls as you walk deeper into the great hall, the air filled with the rustle of silk and the soft hum of distant music. You step into the medieval world, an age of towering castles, noble courts, and lavish gowns that sweep across cold stone floors like painted waves. Everywhere you look, women drift through the room like porcelain figures, their movements elegant yet strangely rigid, their breaths shallow beneath the weight of their garments. Their gowns shimmer under candlelight, embroidered with gold thread and precious stones. But your gaze is inevitably drawn to something else: the impossibly small waists, cinched so tightly that you can almost hear the strain of bone and fabric. The corset, at first glance, seems like nothing more than an accessory of beauty. It curves the body perfectly, sculpting a silhouette that artists praise and poets immortalize. It is a symbol of nobility, refinement, and feminine grace. But as you stand among these women, watching their controlled smiles and carefully measured breaths, you feel the truth pressing in like the laces pulled behind their backs. Beauty, in this world, is not a gift. It is a cost, and the corset is the currency every woman must pay. To understand this world, you must step back into the era that shaped it, the medieval period, stretching from the 12th to the 16th centuries, when fashion was not simply decorative. It was a language, a social signal, a declaration of caste, wealth, and obedience. Women of noble birth were expected to embody the ideals of their status, their value displayed not only in their manners and marriages, but in their bodies themselves. A tightly bound waist was a symbol of discipline, of purity, of beauty controlled and molded into perfection. The narrower the waist, the higher the admiration, and the more carefully guarded the reputation. Corsets, made of stiffened linen, whalebone, leather, or even iron, became the unseen machinery beneath these gowns. They forced the ribs inward, pressed the stomach flat, and shaped the torso into the desired form, often with little regard for the woman inside. The ideal silhouette was celebrated, but no one spoke openly of the sacrifices required to maintain it. The women who wore these garments became accustomed to shallow breathing, lightheadedness, aching ribs, and a constant pressure that felt like a silent hand gripping their bodies. Yet they endured it all in the name of beauty, sophistication, and social duty. And this is where the real story begins, not in the shimmering halls or the elegant gowns, but beneath the surface where the corset hugs the body like a cage. For all its elegance, its artistry, its place in the history of fashion, the corset carried a truth that medieval society rarely acknowledged. It reshaped not only the appearance of women, but their bodies, crushing ribs, compressing organs, altering posture, and leaving long-term damage concealed beneath velvet and lace. As you stand in that medieval hall, surrounded by beauty that seems effortless, you begin to understand the darker side of this world. Behind every graceful movement is a hidden strain. Behind every perfect silhouette is a body fighting to breathe. And behind every corset is a story, one of sacrifice, of suffering, and of the silent expectations placed on women who lived in a time when beauty was not a choice but a requirement. Tonight, you'll walk with them through that story. And as the candles burn low and the music fades into the cold medieval night, you'll see that the true weight of the corset was never just the fabric and bone, it was the burden no one else ever saw. There are evenings, quiet, lamplight-colored evenings, where history doesn't feel like a distant lecture, but like a room you can step into. Tonight, you find yourself drifting into one of those rooms, a place suspended somewhere between candle smoke and whispered vanity. And in the middle of that slow-moving haze stands a woman from centuries before you, drawing in a long, steady breath as another pulls tightly at the laces on her back. You might not realize it at first, but you're witnessing the birth of an idea far older than fashion magazines or catwalks. The corset, that silent architect of beauty and suffering. The room around you is dim, framed by thick wooden beams and draped fabrics dyed in faded hues, wine, moss, old rose. The air smells faintly of tallow candles and a hint of lavender crushed into linen. A maid stands behind the woman, fingers quick and practiced, tugging at braided cords that snake through eyelets of stiffened leather. You hear each pull as a soft THP, followed by the whisper of fabric shifting, tightening, molding. The woman doesn't speak. She lifts her chin just slightly, the way one might when bracing for something familiar but never pleasant. And you, simply watching, feel a strange sympathy slip into your chest. Because even though you are centuries removed from her world, you understand the reason behind the ritual. Humans across eras have always curled themselves toward beauty, even when beauty curls back with teeth. A soft knock echoes from beyond the door. The maid pauses, but the woman gestures gently for her to continue. There is no time to stop. Appearances wait for no one. As the laces pull, the woman's waist narrows just a little at first, then more obviously, until the shape seems almost sculpted, like a column of marble coaxed into curves. The corset she wears is nothing like the Victorian versions you may imagine. It is rougher, simpler, more primal, stitched from thick leather, hardened with layers, and reinforced with thin pieces of whalebone that press against her skin like the ribs of some ancient creature. She exhales sharply when the maid gives the final tug. The sound that slips from her lips is not pain, exactly, nor comfort. It is something caught between the two. You notice the slightest tremor in her fingertips as she rests them along the ridges created by the corset structure. What you're seeing is the medieval answer to beauty. Beauty purchased not with makeup or illusions, but with constraint, with compression, with obedience to an ideal carved by the opinions of others. Outside the chamber, the world hums. The clatter of wooden wheels, the shuffle of boots on cobblestone, a distant church bell announcing the hour. Inside, however, the only movement is the woman turning toward a small metal mirror, its surface warped enough to distort her reflection. She tilts her head and studies herself the way nobles study maps, seeking advantage, fearing flaw. Now, you might think she's doing this for admiration, for courtly gatherings where gossip blooms like thorns. But in reality, she does it because everyone expects her to. In her world, beauty is not personal. Beauty is a currency tied to status, marriage, and the stories people tell behind your back. The corset wraps around her like a second spine, dictating how she will stand, how she will breathe, how she will move through her day. Even her size must be measured now. The garment doesn't tolerate anything careless. She steps toward a carved wooden chest and lifts the lid, revealing layers of silk and linen gowns, each one designed to flow smoothly over the sculpted shape forced beneath. Her hand settles on a gown dyed a deep, earthy red. The fabric pools between her fingers like liquid shadow. When she puts it on, the corset beneath causes the gown to fall in elegant lines, unnaturally straight at the torso, softening only past the hips. You watch the transformation and realize it isn't simply clothing, it's performance. a quiet act of submission that the entire aristocratic world applauds. The maid fastens the final clasp, then steps back, admiring or perhaps evaluating the end result. But the woman doesn't look at her reflection again. She already knows what she must be. You can feel something tighten in your own chest, a distant echo of the pressure she carries. Perhaps that's the strangest part. Even as a visitor in this memory, you sense the weight of her choices, or rather, the choices made for her. She moves toward the doorway with slow, deliberate footsteps, not because she wants to, but because speed is no longer hers. The corset has decided her limits. When she reaches the hall, the murmur of other noblewomen rises around her in warm waves. They wear similar shapes beneath their ornate fabrics, some tighter, some looser, but all marked by the same cultural script. Their waists, too, are molded by leather and bone. Their breath, too, is rationed between politeness and constraint. One of them turns toward her, eyes lingering just long enough to assess whether the silhouette is ideal, whether the laces are pulled tight enough, whether she has succeeded or failed in the unspoken competition. You can almost hear the silent judgment humming in the air, thick as incense. And yet, beneath all of it, there is something undeniably hypnotic about the scene. Women floating like sculptures through torchlit halls, every movement slow and careful, their bodies arranged into shapes deemed desirable by the world around them. It's beautiful, in a way, but the kind of beauty that asks for a price. As the woman descends a set of stone steps, a passing knight offers his hand. She accepts not out of courtesy, but necessity. The corset prevents her from bending easily, from catching her balance quickly, from trusting her own body's movements. Her breath, once natural, is now a quiet negotiation. You follow her through corridors painted with shadows. The air cooler here, scented faintly of damp stone. The castle walls feel close, almost conspiratorial, as if they too understand the ritual you have witnessed. In the great hall, long tables stretch out beneath banners embroidered with sigils. The room glows with firelight. Flames ripple in iron sconces along the walls. Music hums softly in the background, strings, pipes, the occasional tap of a drum. Servants weave between guests with practiced ease, carrying flagons of wine and plates of roasted meats. The woman takes her place at the long table reserved for the noble families. As she sits, you notice how rigid her posture must remain. She cannot slouch, cannot lean comfortably, cannot relax in the way the human body naturally seeks after long hours. The corset dictates every inch of her presence. When she lifts her cup, her arm moves gracefully, but only because the garment forces such grace. When she turns her head, her shoulders follow, restricted by the stiffened structure at her torso. And when she laughs politely at a nobleman's comment, the sound is faint, shallow. Her lungs simply cannot give more. As the evening unfolds, you begin to understand what the corset truly represents. It is not just fashion or decoration. It is a silent agreement made between a woman and a world that demands shape over comfort, appearance over autonomy. In every tight pull of leather and bone, there exists the echo of expectation, an invisible hand guiding her into a role she never chose to resist. Yet, in moments when she smiles softly, real smiles, the ones where her eyes warm and her shoulders ease, you see a spark of something defiant. A quiet truth, that beneath the rigid shell, there remains a person untouched by expectation. A person who survives the squeezing and shaping, who continues to breathe, even when breath is rationed. By the time the gathering ends, the candles have melted low. The air feels heavier, filled with the lingering scent of wine and smoke. The woman rises slowly, careful not to strain the garment that has held her captive for hours. You walk with her back through the corridors. You hear the controlled rhythm of her breath. You see the slight exhaustion in her movements, the subtle relief at nearing her chambers. When she finally enters the quiet room again, she stands still for a long moment, eyes closed, and then she gestures for the maid to approach. The first loosened lace is like the release of a storm cloud. She inhales fully, deeply for the first time all night. Another lace, another breath. Her shoulders drop, her ribs expand, her body reclaims itself inch by inch. When the corset finally comes off, it leaves faint marks along her skin, indentations like ghostly fingerprints. She runs her hand over them slowly. Her expression is unreadable. You realize then that the corset is more than a garment. It is a story etched into the lives of women across centuries, a story of beauty fashioned under pressure, of femininity shaped by the hands of expectation, of bodies transformed to meet ideals never their own. And as you watch her step toward the window where the moon hangs like a tired lantern, you sense something quiet but powerful rising inside her. Freedom, however temporary. Tonight, you have not merely observed the birth of the corset. You have felt it. You have walked beside it. You have carried its weight for a moment. And somewhere in that experience, you begin to understand the women who lived beneath its grip not as silhouettes in history books, but as real, breathing souls who sacrificed comfort for admiration, autonomy for approval, and themselves for the sake of being seen. There are moments, quiet and easily overlooked, when you finally notice the cost of beauty. Not the price paid in coin or silk, but the quieter toll, the kind that presses from the inside out. Tonight, as you drift deeper into the world of corsets and candlelit halls, you begin to feel that inner pressure, the invisible squeeze that once shaped not just the silhouettes of women but the very rhythm of their breath. And it begins with ribs. You find yourself once again in the same stone chamber, a room heavy with velvet drapes and the faint scent of rose oil. The woman you met before stands near the bed, but this time you see her differently. You notice the stillness in her chest, the way her breaths fall short, clipped and delicate like a bird trying to stay quiet in its cage. She has worn the corset for hours, longer than comfort allows, longer than reason would defend, and though her face reveals nothing, her body whispers the truth. Her ribs, once free to expand like the bellows of a hearth, now move in measured increments, tightly bound by the garment that commands her posture. A maid enters quietly, carrying a small tray of water scented with mint. She offers it with a bow, and the woman accepts it, raising the cup with a grace so practiced that you might mistake it for ease. But when she drinks, she pauses a moment too long, and you see her swallow slowly, painfully, as if her body is negotiating with itself. You take a step closer, sensing something fragile, as if one wrong movement might disrupt the careful balance keeping her upright. A gust of wind slips through the narrow window and brushes against her gown. The sound is soft, but in the stillness of the room, it feels like a warning. Her hand drifts to her ribs, not openly, not in complaint, but in a subtle gesture of awareness. You watch the way her fingertips press gently along the curve of her side, as if searching for the boundaries her lungs can no longer reach. This is the part history rarely mentions, the quiet suffering beneath the silk. Another noble woman enters, her gown shimmering in the firelight. She greets your lady with polite warmth, but her eyes narrow just slightly when she takes in the tightness of the corset. Not with pity, no. Pity has no place here but in evaluation. Approval, competition. They speak for a time, exchanging pleasant words about the evening's feast, the new fabrics arriving from distant lands, and the latest rumors drifting through the court like stubborn ghosts. But while they talk, you notice something both mesmerizing and troubling. Every few sentences, the woman you watch must pause to inhale, just a little more deeply, just enough to continue speaking without drawing attention. Her ribs lift in a small, controlled rise, but never fully, never freely. The pressure on her torso is constant, an unseen hand pushing inward where bone was never meant to fold. You can almost feel it yourself, an imagined tightness creeping along your own ribs, as if echoing her discomfort. The room seems thinner, the air warmer. The weight of her breath hangs between you both. After her guest leaves, the woman moves toward the large mirror in the corner, the one with iron framing and a surface warped from age. She rests her palms along the edge and studies her reflection, not in vanity, but in quiet contemplation. Her breath fogs the mirror for a moment, creating a faint cloud that disappears far too quickly. Her ribs do not move the way yours do. They cannot expand outward. Instead, they rise sharply, vertically, each breath forced upward rather than outward. You recognize the unnatural pattern instantly. The corset has reshaped her lungs' freedom, sculpting her breath as it sculpted her waist. A servant approaches, offering to loosen the garment, but she shakes her head. Her voice is soft, controlled, and you hear the faint strain threading through it. Not yet. The words carry weight, a mix of duty, pride, and expectation. She is not alone in this. Somewhere, in every great house across the land, women stand like her, breathing shallowly, smiling beautifully, enduring silently. The corset has become part of the language of their lives. And like any language, it shapes the way they exist. Later, as she leaves her chamber, you follow her through corridors lined with tapestries. A flicker of torchlight dances across her face, revealing the faint pallor beneath her carefully maintained poise. She walks with slow, measured elegance, her movements confined to narrow planes. Her chest barely rises. Her shoulders remain perfectly aligned. You begin to hear it now. The subtle rhythm of her breathing. Inhale short and tight. Exhale quick and quiet. Inhale again, higher this time, not deeper. She descends the stairs, and halfway down, her hand grips the railing for just a second longer than necessary. You sense a wave of dizziness crossing her. It passes quickly, like a shadow gliding over moonlit water, but you see it. You feel it. When she reaches the courtyard, cold air washes over her, carrying the scent of damp stone and torch smoke. She closes her eyes and draws a breath. It is thin, so thin, but she savors it, as if the night itself is kinder than the hallways she just left behind. A group of noblemen and women gather nearby, discussing plans for an upcoming celebration. Laughter ripples through the air, light and careless. When she joins them, she tilts her head gracefully, listening, responding when needed. But as the conversation swells with excitement and amusement, you notice something. Her breaths quicken. Not from laughter, she cannot laugh freely, but from the effort of staying upright, maintaining decorum, performing the version of herself the world expects to see. You watch her ribs, trapped behind leather and stitching, attempting to lift with each inhalation, only to be pushed back inward. The pressure is relentless, a steady drumbeat beneath her skin. When a joke is made, the noblewoman beside her releases a burst of laughter. The woman you watch tries to respond in kind, but only manages a soft, controlled sound. Her hand slips discreetly to her side once more. Someone approaches, offering a cup of spiced wine. She loosens her grip on the railing to accept it. But the moment the warm liquid touches her lips, you sense something shift. The combination of heat, tightness, and exhaustion creates a ripple of weakness. Her gaze drifts downward, her lashes flutter. A tremor pulses through her shoulders. One of the noblemen lunges forward just as her knees buckle. He catches her gently, lowering her into a nearby stone bench. Gasps scatter through the courtyard like startled birds. Someone calls for assistance. A maid hurries over with smelling salts. You stare, breath caught in your throat, as the woman leans forward, unable to inhale fully. Each attempt is shallow, trembling, barely meeting her body's needs. Her corset, beautiful, sculpted, admired, has stolen the air from her. When the maid finally loosens the laces at her back, you hear it. The sound is small but unmistakable, a gasp that is both relief and ache. Her ribs rise more fully now, expanding into the space they were denied. Her lungs flood with air, fast and desperate, like someone surfacing after a long dive. Her color returns slowly, warmth spreading from her cheeks outward. She touches her ribs, feeling them move, their natural shape reasserting itself after hours of confinement. The noblemen make polite excuses and withdraw, leaving her with her maid and the fading echoes of their concern. You sit near her in the quiet that follows, listening to the wind rustle through ivy climbing the stone walls. Her breaths are uneven still, but free, and in those breaths lies a truth deeper than fashion or vanity. You understand now that the corset's greatest cruelty is not the squeezing of the waist, but the sculpting of breath, the reshaping of life itself. Because breath is the thread that holds a person together, and when that thread is pulled too tight, everything frays. She rises after several minutes, steadier now. The maid hesitates, unsure whether to remove the corset completely, but the woman shakes her head once more, softly but firmly. "It must stay," she murmurs. Duty again, expectation again, a promise she never chose but continues to uphold. When she walks back through the corridor toward her room, you follow quietly. Her breathing is better now, but fragile, an unsettled flame flickering in the wind. Once inside the chamber, she sits on the edge of her bed, her hand pressed against her ribs. She looks up at the ceiling, eyes half closed, and for a moment, you see the shadow of a longing she will never speak aloud. The wish to breathe freely, fully, without the walls of leather closing around her. But such freedom belongs only to those who live beyond the gaze of society. She is not one of them. Her world demands structure, elegance, discipline, even if it costs her breath, even if it steals her strength one shallow inhale at a time. You remain beside her until the candles burn low. You listen to the quiet struggle in the rise and fall of her chest, and in that fragile rhythm, you recognize the space where history meets humanity. It is not the corset alone that tightens her ribs. It is expectation. It is performance. It is the endless demand to be more beautiful than comfortable, more admired than alive. And as the final candle sputters, its flame thinning like her breath once did, you realize why this story matters. Because beauty, when forced, becomes a cage. Because breath, when stolen, becomes memory. And because beneath every elegant silhouette of the medieval noblewoman was a pair of ribs pressing inward, always inward, shaping not just her body, but the story she would leave behind. You find yourself once again within the dim confines of that same chamber. The shadows stretch long along the stone walls, and the low hum of the evening court murmurs in the distance, muffled by the thick oak doors. Tonight, the woman is seated before her dressing table, and she's gazing into the same warped mirror, the one that always shows just a little more than what is visible at the surface. But this time, her posture is different. It's not the graceful, poised manner you've witnessed before, where she moves like a carefully constructed statue. Tonight, her shoulders sag just slightly. Her breath comes in slow, deliberate intervals. She's just removed the corset. The maid is standing by the bed, her hands folded neatly in front of her, waiting. The room is filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the distant clattering of court-life laughter, music, and the soft hum of a dozen whispered conversations. The woman's hands rest on the edges of her abdomen, the bare skin now exposed after hours of compression. You watch her fingers gently explore the area, feeling for the shapes that once belonged to her internal organs, now shifted and rearranged by the tight grip of the corset. Her body, molded into a silhouette that had once been the envy of the noble courts, now seems to breathe in relief, though you notice the slight tremor that dances through her frame. It is the tremor of someone who has spent years carrying the weight of more than just the corset. The weight of the expectations, the scrutiny, the relentless pursuit of beauty that was never meant to come at such a high cost. It's not just her waist that's been shaped. Her organs, too, have been molded. She places her hand delicately just below her ribs, and you feel a pang of something familiar within you, the subtle dread that comes with realizing that the body, in all its complexity, has been forced to comply with an external rule, a law of beauty and posture that it was never meant to follow. As she rests her fingers along her stomach, you hear a soft, pained sigh escape her lips. It's not the kind of sound someone makes when they are exhausted from a long day of entertaining, or the kind of sigh someone releases in casual discontent. It is a sigh that speaks of years of invisible injury, years of slowly suffocating beneath a weight not just of fabric and bone, but of society's unspoken demands. A sigh that speaks of the organs compressed into unnatural positions, stomach, intestines, liver all reshaped, displaced by the corset's unyielding grip. You see her shift in her seat, her chest rising a little higher, but the way she moves is careful, deliberate, as though each small adjustment is a delicate negotiation with her own body. She turns to face the maid, who looks at her with a mixture of concern and loyalty, but the noblewoman waves her away gently. She's been through this before, no doubt, this moment of relief after the corset comes off, the small, fleeting comfort that can only be grasped for a brief time before the pressure inevitably returns. But for now, she is free, or so it seems. The contours of her body, freed from their cage, begin to relax. Her stomach, once tightly held in, now bulges slightly where the corset had once flattened it. The skin around her waist, once thin and pinched, is now softening, like a flower exhaling after a long storm. You step closer, drawn into the quiet space between her and the world outside. You realize now that this is not just the relief of shedding a piece of clothing. No, this is the release of a lifetime's worth of strain. Her organs, crushed by hours of confinement, now fight to resume their rightful positions. Her liver, no longer shoved to the right side, now finds space to breathe. Her intestines, once squashed and restricted by the narrow confines of the corset, now begin to stretch again, though they do so reluctantly, as if unsure of how to reclaim their place. She places a hand on her abdomen, feeling the softness there that the corset had so carefully suppressed. The feeling, she must know, is both comforting and unsettling. The release, though necessary, is not without consequence. You see it now. The compression of the corset wasn't just a physical restraint. It was an assault on the very structure of the woman's body. The bones, too, had been shaped to fit the mold, a mold that demanded more than just a fashionable silhouette. The corset had crushed her internal organs, pushing them into places they were never meant to be. The liver, once settled in its natural position, had been forced to shift, affecting digestion. The stomach, now deprived of its space, had been slowed, making digestion a slow, painful process. And as for her intestines, once allowed to move freely within the confines of her body, now pressed against the walls of her rib cage, restricting the natural flow of the body's processes. You watch her, the slow, deliberate way she moves her fingers along her stomach, seeking the places where the organs still lie in their misaligned state. She seems to be assessing the damage, though there is no outward expression of pain, only a quiet acceptance, a resignation to the fact that this is the price of beauty. The maid, perhaps sensing the quiet turmoil in her mistress, approaches with a pitcher of water and a cloth, but the woman waves her away. She needs no more comfort, no more reminders of the life she leads. She has learned to live within this narrow, breathless existence. She has learned to smile, to sit straight, to speak with grace and dignity, all while her internal organs shift and adjust to the restrictions placed on them. But even as you watch, you know this isn't a simple matter of discomfort. This isn't merely about feeling tight or restricted. No, the corset's damage runs deeper, and it lingers long after the garment is removed. Her body, strained under the weight of her corset for hours on end, has been forced into a pattern that simply doesn't belong. The ribs, too, have been bent to fit the mold. You see her fingers briefly press against the sides of her chest, where the ribs have been pushed inward, where the spaces between the bones have narrowed. There's a quiet anguish in her touch, a feeling that, despite the corset being gone, her body will never return to its original form. You begin to understand the far-reaching consequences of this practice, the slow, insidious damage that comes with compressing the body in ways it was never meant to bend. And it's not just the discomfort of the present. It's the years of wear and tear, the gradual deterioration of the body's natural rhythm. The organs, once free to expand and contract with ease, now move with difficulty. Breathing becomes an effort. Digestion slows. The body's natural processes are stunted, limited, constricted by the very garment designed to shape the woman's exterior. And yet, despite it all, the woman does not falter. She does not collapse under the weight of her own suffering. Instead, she stands tall, resilient, composed. She has learned to adapt, learned to endure. She knows no other way. As you watch her rise from the chair, her movements slow but graceful, you realize that this is not simply a tale of fashion or vanity. This is the story of the body's struggle to survive under the weight of an ideal. This is the story of a woman's body, compressed not just by fabric and bone, but by centuries of expectation. And no matter how much she may try to free herself, the mark of that compression will always remain. She walks to the window, gazing out into the night, her breath still shallow but no longer constrained by the corset. The stars twinkle above, distant and silent, as if watching her struggle. And for a moment, you wonder what would it take to free her fully, to release not just her body, but her spirit, from the invisible cage of beauty that has held her for so long. But the answer is elusive. Perhaps it is not enough to simply remove the corset. Perhaps it takes more than just shedding the outward garment. Perhaps it takes a whole new world, one where women can breathe freely, without the weight of expectation pressing down on their ribs. For now, though, the woman steps back into the shadows, her breath still short but steady. She has survived another night. And in the silence of the room, you are left to wonder how long she can continue to endure. The corset may be gone, but its effects, its silent internal damage, will linger long after the last laces are undone. You find yourself once again within the dim confines of that same chamber. The shadows stretch long along the stone walls, and the low hum of the evening court murmurs in the distance, muffled by the thick oak doors. Tonight, the woman is seated before her dressing table, and she's gazing into the same warped mirror, the one that always shows just a little more than what is visible at the surface. But this time, her posture is different. It's not the graceful, poised manner you've witnessed before, where she moves like a carefully constructed statue. Tonight, her shoulders sag just slightly. Her breath comes in slow, deliberate intervals. She's just removed the corset. The maid is standing by the bed, her hands folded neatly in front of her, waiting. The room is filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the distant clattering of court-life laughter, music, and the soft hum of a dozen whispered conversations. The woman's hands rest on the edges of her abdomen, the bare skin now exposed after hours of compression. You watch her fingers gently explore the area, feeling for the shapes that once belonged to her internal organs, now shifted and rearranged by the tight grip of the corset. Her body, molded into a silhouette that had once been the envy of the noble courts, now seems to breathe in relief, though you notice the slight tremor that dances through her frame. It is the tremor of someone who has spent years carrying the weight of more than just the corset, the weight of the expectations, the scrutiny, the relentless pursuit of beauty that was never meant to come at such a high cost. It's not just her waist that's been shaped. Her organs, too, have been molded. She places her hand delicately just below her ribs, and you feel a pang of something familiar within you. the subtle dread that comes with realizing that the body, in all its complexity, has been forced to comply with an external rule, a law of beauty and posture that it was never meant to follow. As she rests her fingers along her stomach, you hear a soft, pained sigh escape her lips. It's not the kind of sound someone makes when they are exhausted from a long day of entertaining, or the kind of sigh someone releases in casual discontent. It is a sigh that speaks of years of invisible injury, years of slowly suffocating beneath a weight not just of fabric and bone, but of society's unspoken demands. A sigh that speaks of the organs compressed into unnatural positions, stomach, intestines, liver, all reshaped, displaced by the corset's unyielding grip. You see her shift in her seat, her chest rising a little higher, but the way she moves is careful, deliberate, as though each small adjustment is a delicate negotiation with her own body. She turns to face the maid, who looks at her with a mixture of concern and loyalty, but the noble woman waves her away gently. She's been through this before. No doubt this moment of relief after the corset comes off, the small, fleeting comfort that can only be grasped for a brief time before the pressure inevitably returns. But for now, she is free, or so it seems. The contours of her body, freed from their cage, begin to relax. Her stomach, once tightly held in, now bulges slightly where the corset had once flattened it. The skin around her waist, once thin and pinched, is now softening, like a flower exhaling after a long storm. You step closer, drawn into the quiet space between her and the world outside. You realize now that this is not just the relief of shedding a piece of clothing. No, this is the release of a lifetime's worth of strain. Her organs, crushed by hours of confinement, now fight to resume their rightful positions. Her liver, no longer shoved to the right side, now finds space to breathe. Her intestines, once squashed and restricted by the narrow confines of the corset, now begin to stretch again, though they do so reluctantly, as if unsure of how to reclaim their place. She places a hand on her abdomen, feeling the softness there that the corset had so carefully suppressed. The feeling, she must know, is both comforting and unsettling. The release, though necessary, is not without consequence. You see it now. The compression of the corset wasn't just a physical restraint. It was an assault on the very structure of the woman's body. The bones, too, had been shaped to fit the mold, a mold that demanded more than just a fashionable silhouette. The corset had crushed her internal organs, pushing them into places they were never meant to be. The liver, once settled in its natural position, had been forced to shift, affecting digestion. The stomach, now deprived of its space, had been slowed, making digestion a slow, painful process. And as for her intestines, once allowed to move freely within the confines of her body, now pressed against the walls of her rib cage, restricting the natural flow of the body's processes. You watch her, the slow, deliberate way she moves her fingers along her stomach, seeking the places where the organs still lie in their misaligned state. She seems to be assessing the damage, though there is no outward expression of pain, only a quiet acceptance, a resignation to the fact that this is the price of beauty. The maid, perhaps sensing the quiet turmoil in her mistress, approaches with a pitcher of water and a cloth, but the woman waves her away. She needs no more comfort, no more reminders of the life she leads. She has learned to live within this narrow, breathless existence. She has learned to smile, to sit straight, to speak with grace and dignity, all while her internal organs shift and adjust to the restrictions placed on them. But even as you watch, you know this isn't a simple matter of discomfort. This isn't merely about feeling tight or restricted. No, the corset's damage runs deeper, and it lingers long after the garment is removed. Her body, strained under the weight of her corset for hours on end, has been forced into a pattern that simply doesn't belong. The ribs, too, have been bent to fit the mold. You see her fingers briefly press against the sides of her chest, where the ribs have been pushed inward, where the spaces between the bones have narrowed. There's a quiet anguish in her touch, a feeling that, despite the corset being gone, her body will never return to its original form. You begin to understand the far-reaching consequences of this practice, the slow, insidious damage that comes with compressing the body in ways it was never meant to bend. And it's not just the discomfort of the present, it's the years of wear and tear, the gradual deterioration of the body's natural rhythm. The organs, once free to expand and contract with ease, now move with difficulty. Breathing becomes an effort. Digestion slows. The body's natural processes are stunted, limited, constricted by the very garment designed to shape the woman's exterior. And yet, despite it all, the woman does not falter. She does not collapse under the weight of her own suffering. Instead, she stands tall, resilient, composed. She has learned to adapt, learned to endure. She knows no other way. As you watch her rise from the chair, her movements slow but graceful, you realize that this is not simply a tale of fashion or vanity. This is the story of the body's struggle to survive under the weight of an ideal. This is the story of a woman's body, compressed not just by fabric and bone, but by centuries of expectation. And no matter how much she may try to free herself, the mark of that compression will always remain. She walks to the window, gazing out into the night, her breath still shallow but no longer constrained by the corset. The stars twinkle above, distant and silent, as if watching her struggle, and for a moment, you wonder, what would it take to free her fully, to release not just her body, but her spirit, from the invisible cage of beauty that has held her for so long? But the answer is elusive. Perhaps it is not enough to simply remove the corset. Perhaps it takes more than just shedding the outward garment. Perhaps it takes a whole new world, one where women can breathe freely, without the weight of expectation pressing down on their ribs. For now, though, the woman steps back into the shadows, her breath still short but steady. She has survived another night, and in the silence of the room, you are left to wonder how long she can continue to endure. The corset may be gone, but its effects, its silent internal damage, will linger long after the last laces are undone. It's well into the night now, the candlelight dimming to a soft flicker as you stand in the far corner of the room, observing the woman once again. The shadows seem to stretch further tonight, thicker than usual, almost as if the very air has become heavy with the weight of her quiet suffering. She sits by the window, her hands resting on her lap, her fingers fidgeting with the delicate lace at the edge of her gown. But her posture is stiff, unnaturally so, and the gentle shift of her weight from one side to the other speaks of discomfort. Her breathing is steady, yes, but there's a faint unease in the way she moves. You notice it more clearly now, the subtle swelling in her feet, the way her ankles seem slightly puffed, the delicate flush that rises around her lower legs, as though the blood simply refuses to move the way it should. The corset, that heavy and unrelenting garment, is no longer there, but the damage it has caused lingers like an old wound that never truly heals. Tonight, it is not her waist you notice, but her limbs. The subtle signs of what it has done to her circulation are becoming clearer by the moment. As she shifts again, you see the faintest wince pass across her face. She pauses, and for a brief moment, her hand drifts to her ankle. The swelling is more pronounced now, and as she moves her fingers along the curve of her leg, you can see the discomfort written in the tension of her features. Her lips press together tightly, and her eyes narrow just slightly. It's a quiet, painful moment, one of those moments that could be easily overlooked by anyone who doesn't know how to read the signs. But you do. You realize, in that moment, that it's not just her waist that has suffered. The corset has altered the very way her blood moves through her body. Its constriction around her torso has restricted the flow of blood to her lower limbs, and now she must live with the quiet, insidious consequences of that restriction. She rises carefully, her hand resting on the table for support. The steps she takes are slow and deliberate, each one a careful calculation, as though the simple act of walking has become a chore. Her legs, once free to move easily, now feel heavier with each step. The discomfort, the subtle burning sensation that spreads through her calves, is almost too much for her to ignore. You watch as she pauses, her breath catching just a little, and her gaze shifts downward to her feet, where the swelling has grown more pronounced. The flesh stretched tight and uncomfortable. Her feet, once dainty and graceful, now seem a little too large for her body. The pressure of the day's long hours in the corset having caused them to retain more fluid than they should. You can almost feel the weight of her discomfort, the way her shoes must pinch now, the tightness of the fabric pressing against her feet, as if they're being suffocated. She stands there, motionless for a moment, as if gathering her strength. The soft rustle of her gown as she shifts her weight is the only sound that fills the room. The slow, deliberate rise and fall of her chest continues, but there's something different about her now, something more fragile, more aware of her limitations. She's lived with the corset for so long that her body has become accustomed to its tight embrace. But it's the moments after, the moments when she's finally free of it, that she feels the true cost of its grip. You notice, too, the faint blush on her legs, the same red flush you've seen on her feet now creeping up toward her thighs, as though the blood that should flow freely through her veins has become stagnant, trapped by the pressure of the corset. Her circulation is sluggish, reluctant, unable to return to its natural rhythm. You can almost see the strain on her face as she flexes her toes, trying to relieve the discomfort, to coax her body back into the freedom it once had. There's a quiet helplessness in the way she moves now, a resignation to the fact that her body no longer functions the way it should. Every step feels like an effort, each one more labored than the last. You see the subtle limp in her gait, the way she leans just a little too much on one leg, the other struggling to bear the weight of her body. Her legs, her feet are not the only parts of her affected, though. The compression from the corset doesn't just restrict blood flow to her lower limbs. It also cuts off the vital oxygen-rich blood to her organs, to her core. You can see it in the pallor of her complexion, the faint shadows beneath her eyes, as though her body is fighting to stay alive, to keep up with the demands she places on it. The swelling in her feet and legs is just a small part of the greater story of fatigue and weakness that runs deeper. Her muscles, weakened by years of inadequate circulation, have become stiff and uncooperative. She pauses by the window once more, her hands pressed lightly against the sill. The night air is cool, but it doesn't seem to help her much. The breeze offers little relief, the swelling in her feet and legs a constant reminder of the price she has paid for beauty. Her fingers twitch, as though she wants to take off her shoes, to remove every trace of the constriction that has left her feeling less than whole. But she hesitates. She always hesitates. The nobility of her status, the expectations of society, have taught her to endure, to appear composed even when the weight of her discomfort is becoming too much to bear. And yet, even as she stands there, you can see the shift in her. There's something faintly desperate in the way she presses her fingers against the window frame. Her posture seems to droop just a little more, as though she is finally allowing herself to feel the weariness that has been growing inside her for so long. The swelling in her feet and legs is no longer just a physical discomfort. It is a reminder, an unwelcome companion that will not leave her. You hear her breath hitch just slightly as she turns away from the window, her steps even slower now. She approaches her bed, but when she sits, she doesn't immediately relax. She remains still, her legs extended out before her, her feet propped up on the edge of the mattress, as if she's trying to encourage the blood to flow once more. Her fingers graze her calves, and you can see the slight indentations in her skin, the way her muscles seem to resist movement. The veins in her legs have become more visible now, blue lines cutting through the softness of her skin, and you wonder just how much longer she can endure this silent suffering. The corset has done its work, yes, it has shaped her body, carved her waist into the ideal form, but what it has truly done is rob her of her body's natural rhythm. It has stolen her circulation, forcing her blood to pool in places it shouldn't. It has drained her of the vitality she needs to keep going. She looks down at her feet again, the discomfort in her expression unmistakable. Her fingers trace the outline of her swollen ankles, but there is no relief. The swelling, though reduced now that she is sitting, remains stubborn, a constant reminder of what the corset has taken from her. For a long while, she doesn't speak, doesn't move. The silence in the room feels thick, almost oppressive, as if the very walls are closing in on her. You can feel the weight of her exhaustion, the weariness of a body that has fought for so long to remain elegant, to remain composed, even as the very circulation of her body betrays her. Finally, she stands again, her movements slower, more deliberate. She walks back toward the dressing table, her feet dragging just slightly, and with a final glance at the mirror, she sighs. It's not the sigh of someone who has simply had a long day, it's the sigh of someone who knows their body is no longer their own. The sigh of someone who has endured more than they ever should have. You stand there in the quiet of the room, watching as she turns away from the mirror and moves back to the bed. There is no final release, no moment where she sheds the weight of her corset and is truly free. Instead, there is only the quiet acceptance that the damage has already been done, that the price of beauty has been paid, not just in the shaping of her waist, but in the circulation that no longer flows freely, in the limbs that will never feel quite the same. And as the night deepens, you feel the weight of that truth, how beauty, when pursued at such a cost, can leave a woman not just confined in her body, but drained of the very energy it takes to survive. The night feels heavier than usual. It's not the weight of the room itself, nor the candlelight flickering on the walls. It's the quiet tension in the air, the kind you can feel in your chest, as if something is pressing down on your lungs, just slightly, making it harder to take a full breath. It's almost like the room has become too small, too suffocating, and you sense that the woman before you feels it too. She sits by the window again, a place she often retreats to at the end of the evening. Her gown is beautiful, of course soft velvet, dark and rich in its hue, but tonight, it doesn't seem to carry the usual elegance. Tonight, her shoulders are stiff, and her back is straighter than usual, as if she's holding herself up against an unseen weight. You can almost see the invisible pressure the corset has placed on her body, the tightness that restricts not just her waist, but her very breath. She shifts in her seat, just slightly, and for a moment, you catch the faintest wince. It's subtle, barely noticeable to anyone else, but you see it. The way her hand moves toward her chest, as if she's trying to take in a breath that won't come. You've seen it before, of course, but tonight it's different. Tonight, it's as though every movement she makes has to be measured, every breath calculated. Her corset, that confining structure, is gone now, but the imprint it has left on her body remains. She takes a deep breath, and it comes shallowly, uneven. Her chest expands slowly, just enough to give the illusion of air filling her lungs, but not enough to truly nourish her body with the oxygen it craves. She lifts her hand to her chest again, her fingers pressing against her ribs, trying to force her breath deeper, but it's futile. She can't push any further. You feel the weight of it then, the suffocating stillness in the room, the tension that wraps itself around her chest. The corset, which was designed to create a beautiful silhouette, has stolen something much more vital. It has stolen her ability to breathe freely. You watch her for a long moment, waiting, sensing the subtle change in the air around her. She shifts again, this time standing up slowly. Her hand reaches for the edge of the table to steady herself, and you notice how her movement seems stiff, like every action requires more effort than it should. Her breathing is rapid, almost frantic now, and you realize she's trying to catch her breath, to make up for the lack of air that the corset has forced from her lungs. But it's not enough. She's not getting the oxygen she needs. She walks toward the bed with slow, measured steps, each one heavier than the last, as though the very act of moving is a struggle. Her breath hitches slightly as she reaches the side of the bed, and she places one hand against it, steadying herself. But it doesn't help. The dizziness creeps in, just at the edges of her vision, like a cloud closing in around her. Her fingers grip the bed frame tighter, her knuckles whitening with the effort. And then it happens suddenly, almost without warning. Her breath falters completely, and her head dips forward slightly. You see the way her eyes flutter, the way her body leans just a little too much to one side, and you know what's coming next. The fainting spell. It's not the first time this has happened. It has become an all too familiar occurrence, one she has learned to hide behind a mask of composure. But now, in the quiet of the room, it's impossible to ignore. She gasps, a sharp intake of air, as if trying to fill her lungs in one desperate breath, but it's not enough. The air simply isn't there. The pressure of the corset, the years of compressed ribs, of restricted airflow, have caught up with her. Her knees buckle, just slightly, and she sways. The dizziness intensifies, pulling her into its grasp. For a moment, you think she might collapse completely, but she steadies herself just in time, her breath shallow, her chest heaving with the effort to regain control. The room seems to spin for her, and her vision blurs. She reaches for the edge of the bed again, but this time it feels as though the world is slipping away from her. She stumbles, her steps uneven as she tries to move, but her body feels foreign, as if it has betrayed her. Her lungs, starved for air, ache with the pressure, and her heartbeat quickens, each pulse a reminder of how much her body is struggling to keep up. Her arms reach out instinctively, trying to grasp onto something, anything, to keep herself upright. She breathes in short, shallow gasps now, but it's no use. The air she's drawing in is insufficient. It feels thick and suffocating, and she can't seem to fill her lungs properly. The maid hurries over, her hands grasping the woman's arms, trying to steady her. But the woman's grip is weak. Her head tilts forward again, and this time, she can't stop it. Her body gives way, and she sinks to her knees, the dizziness too much to overcome. You stand frozen, a silent observer to the struggle unfolding before you. You see her chest rise and fall with each jagged breath, each one more labored than the last. Her eyes are wide, searching the room for something to cling to, for a moment of clarity, but the room seems to swim in front of her. She's trapped in the grip of the corset's legacy, its tightness, its restriction. The damage done to her body by the endless compression has become too much for her to bear. She falters again, her breath growing more erratic, and you see her knees tremble as she tries to regain control. The maid, alarmed now, calls out for assistance, but the woman doesn't respond. Her lips part in a silent plea for air, but it's as if the air itself has been stolen from her. Her entire being is focused on that one simple act, breathing, but even that seems out of her reach. You watch her struggle to stand, her body swaying from side to side, as though the very act of staying upright has become a monumental task. The fainting spells have been growing more frequent, more intense. The corset's constant pressure on her ribs and diaphragm has caused long-term damage to her ability to breathe properly. And now, her body is fighting back in the only way it knows how. With one final, desperate breath, she manages to push herself upright, but the effort is too much. She stumbles again, her vision blurring, her legs buckling beneath her. This time, she doesn't catch herself in time. She collapses, but not to the floor. The maid is there to catch her, to guide her gently to the chair by the window. For a long while, the room is quiet. The woman's breathing, though still labored, is less frantic now. Her chest rises and falls, slow and measured, but you see the weakness in her body, the way her shoulders slump with the effort to breathe, as though every breath is a battle she is losing. Her body has become a prisoner to the corset. What was once a symbol of beauty has now become a force of destruction, one that has stolen her breath, her strength, her very ability to move freely. She is trapped in a cycle of fainting spells, dizziness, and exhaustion, unable to break free from the constraints placed on her body by a garment that was meant to shape her, not break her. As the night drags on, the air in the room grows heavier, and you see her, still struggling to regain her composure, still caught in the aftermath of the corset's grip. She leans against the chair, her hands resting on her lap, her fingers twitching slightly. Each breath comes slower now, but it's still a battle one she cannot win alone. You realize then that the corset's impact is not just physical. It is a slow and silent killer, one that steals something far more important than beauty. It steals life itself, each breath, each heartbeat, each moment of freedom, all slowly suffocated by the pressure of perfection. And as the night fades into silence, you understand the true cost of beauty. It is not just the hours spent in discomfort, the swelling in the legs, the ache in the spine. It is the silent struggle for air, for life, that goes unnoticed by those who cannot see the toll it takes on the body. The corset, once a symbol of elegance, now leaves behind only the remnants of a struggle for something as simple as breath. The room is quiet now, save for the soft crackling of the fire in the hearth. Outside, the world feels distant beyond the reach of her still, quiet chamber. The gentle evening breeze brushes against the curtains, but inside, the air is thick, as though the very space is holding its breath. She stands before the mirror, hands resting lightly on the edge of the vanity, eyes tracing her reflection, as if searching for something in the contours of her own face. It's a familiar routine, this ritual of reflection, but tonight it feels different. Tonight, there is something more pressing in the air. You can feel it, a weight that's heavier than the corset she has just removed. She gazes at her image in silence, her chest rising and falling slowly, but her posture remains stiff. The lace and leather of the corset lie forgotten in the corner, but the feeling of it still lingers on her body, as if its grip has been replaced by an invisible chain. It's not just the tightness around her ribs or the faint discomfort in her legs from the swelling that troubles her now. No, this is something deeper. This is the weight of all the years spent under the pressure of expectations, the quiet toll that beauty and perfection have taken on her spirit. You watch her in the mirror, the way her fingers twitch just slightly, as if she's holding something back, something she's afraid to release. The reflection staring back at her is composed, elegant, poised, but you see it in her eyes. There's a shadow there, a quiet tension beneath the surface. It's the shadow of years spent locked in the corset's embrace, the invisible pressure that has shaped not just her body but her very sense of self. She shifts slightly, a small movement, and in that shift, you catch the hint of something fragile, something that wasn't there before. The woman in the mirror looks perfect, of course beautiful, regal, as always. But there's something strained in her expression now, something that reveals the toll the corset has taken not just on her body but on her mind. The corset, which was once simply a garment, has now become a symbol of far more than that. It has become the measure of her worth, her identity, her value in a world that demands nothing less than perfection. You see the slight tremor in her hands as she reaches for her gown, the way she hesitates before pulling it on. It's a small thing, a subtle thing, but it speaks volumes. The woman who stands before the mirror has lived her life bound by a set of expectations she has learned to follow without question. She has been shaped by society's ideals of beauty, forced to conform to an image that was never truly hers. The corset, which she wore every day for years, was not just a tool of fashion. It was a cage, a tight, suffocating cage that held her body in place but also held her mind captive. And now, as she stands there, free of its constriction, the psychological impact begins to surface. The damage done by years of conformity, of forced beauty, is not easily undone. She lifts the gown from the bed, and as she slips it over her head, you notice the careful way she pulls the fabric down. The movement is deliberate, controlled, as if she's trying to maintain some semblance of the composure that the corset demanded of her. The need to appear perfect is so ingrained in her that she can't simply let go of it, even now. Even when the corset is no longer there to enforce its grip, her reflection stares back at her, but the image feels distant. The face she sees in the mirror isn't just her own. It's the face of someone who has lived a life shaped by the gaze of others. Someone who has spent years trying to meet expectations that were never truly hers to carry. She touches her cheek lightly, tracing the curve of her jaw, as if searching for a trace of the person she used to be, the person who didn't have to fit into the mold. But no matter how much she searches, no matter how much she tries to peel back the layers, she cannot escape the weight of those years. The years spent breathing in shallow, restricted gasps beneath the corset's suffocating embrace. The pressure to conform to beauty standards has left its mark on her soul, a mark deeper than any physical scar. It has shaped her self-worth, her sense of identity, in ways she cannot easily escape. You see it now in the way her fingers tremble slightly as she adjusts the fabric of her gown. The corset, the very thing that once defined her, has now become an unspoken symbol of the limitations that have bound her, both physically and mentally. It has become a reflection of the expectations that society places on women, the constant demand to be beautiful, graceful, perfect at all times. No matter the cost, she exhales softly, her breath catching just a little, as she stands in front of the mirror once again. The weight of those years hangs in the air, thick and suffocating, and for the first time, you see the flicker of something behind her eyes, something that has been hidden for so long. It's the realization that she has spent so much of her life living for others, living to meet their expectations, to fulfill their idea of what a woman should be, that she has forgotten how to live for herself. Her hand moves to her chest again, pressing lightly against her ribs, as if feeling the remnants of the corset's grip. But the corset is gone now. What remains is the quiet, invisible strain. The strain of a woman who has spent so many years measuring herself against an impossible standard, who has lived under the pressure of perfection for so long that she no longer knows how to breathe freely. She stands there for a long time, lost in her reflection, as the room grows quieter around her. The fire in the hearth crackles softly, but the silence between you both feels heavier now. It is the silence of realization, the realization that the corset's impact is not just physical, it is mental, it is emotional. It is the slow, creeping awareness that, for so many years, she has been living for an ideal that has never been hers to begin with. You can almost hear her thoughts swirling just beneath the surface. Who is she now, without the corset, without the perfection, without the expectations? And in that moment, you understand something crucial. The corset may have been a physical garment, but its true weight was always psychological. It was a constant reminder of her value, her worth measured not by who she was, but by how she appeared. And now, as she stands before the mirror, freed from its grip, she is left to confront the truth that her worth was never tied to a tiny waist, to the constraints of beauty, to the shape of her body. It is the realization that she is more than just what others have told her she should be. But it is also the painful awareness that breaking free from those constraints is not easy. The psychological toll of living up to such standards is not something that can be undone in an instant. She lowers her gaze from the mirror, her fingers curling gently into fists at her sides. There's a weariness in her expression now, a fatigue that goes beyond the physical. The corset may have been removed, but its mental grip is far harder to escape. It's not just the breathless moments she's endured. It's the years of self-doubt, the constant pressure to meet an ideal that was never her own. And now, as she stands here, she's left to pick up the pieces, left to reclaim a sense of self that was lost somewhere along the way. You watch her as she exhales slowly, deeply, her chest rising and falling, the faintest tremor still in her hands. She closes her eyes for a moment, the weight of everything pressing down on her, but she does not crumble. No, she stands firm. She must. There is no other choice. But you know, deep down, that she will never be the same. The corset's legacy, the pressure to conform, has left a mark on her that will never fully fade. She will always carry that weight quietly, silently, beneath the surface. But perhaps, just perhaps, she is beginning to understand that she doesn't need to carry it anymore. As the night deepens and the candles flicker out, you understand this. It's not just the corset that defined her, but the expectations it represented. And perhaps, in that silent moment of reflection, she is finally beginning to break free from them. The room is dim, the only light coming from the flickering candles on the nightstand, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. It's quiet now, the bustle of the day long past, but you can still feel the weight of the silence heavy, laden with unspoken truths. The woman you've come to know so well tonight sits at the edge of the bed, her hands resting lightly in her lap, her fingers tapping absent-mindedly against the fabric of her gown. The corset, as always, has been removed for the evening, but even in the soft glow of the candlelight, you can see the faint impression of its long hours spent constricting her body. The marks it has left behind are like memories etched in her skin, memories that she cannot easily erase. She shifts slightly in her seat, a quiet wince flashing across her face, though she hides it almost immediately, as though it were nothing more than a passing discomfort. But you notice it. You always do. It's the subtle way she presses her hand to her abdomen, her fingers grazing over the area where the corset had pressed the hardest across her stomach, her pelvis. A soft, almost imperceptible sigh escapes her lips, and you feel a pang of sympathy for her, for the suffering she so carefully hides behind her composure. You've seen her like this before, of course tired, perhaps worn from the day's demands, but there's something more tonight, something heavier. You don't need to be told that it's not just fatigue that weighs her down. It's the quiet, unrelenting discomfort that comes from living in a body bound by expectations and garments designed to reshape it. The corset has been her constant companion for years, squeezing, pressing, constricting. But tonight, its effects feel more evident. The air around her seems thicker somehow, the weight of the corset's legacy pressing down on her even now. She moves slowly, deliberately, as if every motion has been calculated to avoid the sharp, lingering pain that has settled into her abdomen. Her back is straight, as always, but there is a subtle stiffness in her posture tonight, a stiffness that suggests something more than just the marks left by the corset's constriction, something deeper, something that goes beyond the surface of the body. You see it now, the way she shifts again, more noticeably this time, and presses a hand gently against her side, her fingers tracing the outline of her ribcage, as if trying to find relief from the pain that has been building there. Her breath catches in her throat, a small, sharp sound, as though she's trying to hide it, trying to keep it from escaping. But you know it's not just discomfort from the tightness of the garment. It's the result of years of pressure, of compression that has gone beyond the waist, beyond the ribs, into the very core of her being. The corset has pressed against her abdomen for so long that it has become more than a garment. It has become a silent tormentor, a constant reminder of the body's limitations, of its fragility. She inhales slowly, deliberately, her chest rising with a quiet effort, but there's a slight tremor in her hand as it rests against her side. It's the tremor of someone who has borne this weight for far too long, someone whose body has learned to endure, but who has never been allowed to rest. The woman shifts again, this time standing and walking toward the window. Her movements are slow, deliberate, and you see the careful way she places each step, as though the simple act of walking has become a calculated effort. Her breath is shallow, not from exertion, but from something deeper. The corset, which she had worn for so many years, had pressed against her pelvic region, compressing the delicate organs within her uterus, her ovaries restricting their natural function. You see it in the way she moves now, her posture stiff, as though the very act of standing or walking has become a test of endurance. The corset has affected her body in ways she cannot easily escape. It is not just the external discomfort, the physical restrictions on her waist or her lungs. No, it has reached deeper, to her very core. The pressure on her abdomen has impacted her reproductive health, causing pain and discomfort that no one else can see, but that she feels every day. The tightness, the restriction, it has become more than just a cosmetic choice. It has become a threat to her well-being, a constant reminder of the price she pays for beauty. She pauses at the window, her hands resting lightly on the sill, staring out into the darkened courtyard. The air outside is cool, the night still, but it offers little relief. Her body feels heavy, weighed down by the years of pressure, the years of bearing the corset's mark. You watch her for a long moment, the way her fingers twitch slightly, as though the weight of her own thoughts is too much to bear. And in that moment, you begin to understand. The corset has affected more than just her body. It has affected her life, her ability to move freely, to exist without the constant discomfort, without the pain that has become part of her. Her menstrual cycles have been a silent victim of the corset's tight grip, and the painful cramps she has learned to endure each month are but one small symptom of the greater cost. The corset's pressure has constricted the flow of blood, the very lifeblood of her reproductive system, and now she suffers for it. The pain has become a constant companion, a reminder that beauty has a price far higher than what anyone could have imagined. You can see it now in the way her body reacts to even the slightest movements, the way her breath catches when she shifts her weight from one foot to the other. She is in pain, but she cannot show it, not in a world that demands beauty above all else. The corset has stolen her freedom, her comfort, and now it has stolen her health. She turns from the window, her expression unreadable, and moves back toward the bed. Her hand moves to her abdomen again, and you can see the subtle way she presses her fingers into her skin, as though searching for relief, but finding none. The pressure she has endured for so long has taken its toll on her reproductive organs, and now it feels like the damage is irreparable. Her ability to conceive, to bear children, has been compromised by the constant constriction of her waist. The corset's pressure has restricted the blood flow to her pelvic region, causing complications that no one can see. The very thing that was meant to enhance her beauty, this garment of constriction and compression, has become a silent enemy, one that threatens not just her comfort, but her future. You see her sit on the edge of the bed now, her hands resting in her lap, her fingers trembling slightly. There is a stillness in the air, a quiet, oppressive weight that fills the room. She has always carried herself with such grace, such dignity, but now, in the silence of this moment, you see the truth behind that mask. The corset has taken more than just her ability to breathe, more than just her physical freedom. It has taken her sense of control, her ability to live freely in her own body. Her gaze drifts down to her abdomen again, her fingers pressing gently against the area where the corset had once squeezed so tightly. The pain is always there, lurking just beneath the surface, a reminder of what has been lost. The corset has left its mark not just on her body, but on her future. You stand there, silently watching, as she exhales slowly, a deep, controlled breath. The pain never fully leaves her, never fully fades, but she will bear it in silence, just as she always has. She will endure, just as she always has, because beauty in this world demands sacrifice. And as the fire in the hearth begins to die down, casting long shadows across the room, you understand something fundamental. The corset's cost was not just physical. It was a price paid in silence, in hidden pain, in the quiet surrender of a woman's body to the demands of a society that values beauty above all else. She rises from the bed, slowly, carefully, as though the very act of standing requires more energy than she has left to give. You see her reach for the gown she had discarded earlier, the soft fabric slipping through her fingers. And in that moment, you realize the truth that has been hidden for so long. The corset's true cost, its real legacy, is not just in the scars it leaves on a woman's body, but in the scars it leaves on her soul, on her sense of self, on her very ability to live freely in a world that demands so much. It's late into the evening, the fire in the hearth crackling softly, its light flickering and casting long shadows against the stone walls of the room. The night outside feels distant, a quiet world of moonlit stillness that has no place here, inside this room, where all the noise and clamor of the day are slowly fading into a heavy silence. The woman you've come to know so well stands before her mirror, the soft fabric of her gown rustling as she moves. You watch her closely, as always, observing the delicate, almost imperceptible movements that speak volumes. Her back is straight, her shoulders squared, the familiar poise of nobility taking shape as she adjusts the fit of her dress. But tonight, something feels different. The light around her seems almost too bright, too sharp, and the weight of her own reflection seems to settle on her chest like a heavy stone. She moves with grace, as she always does, but there's an air of tension about her, a subtle unease that lingers in the way her fingers pull gently at the fabric, the way her gaze flits to and from the mirror. Her eyes, usually so controlled, carry a flicker of something deeper tonight, something more troubling. It's the look of someone caught between two worlds, the world that values beauty above all, and the body that, after years of striving to meet that standard, has begun to crack beneath the pressure. You watch her shift slightly, her breath catching just a little as she runs her hand across the bodice of her gown. The corset beneath it, long removed for the evening, still lingers in the air like an unspoken truth. The shape, the perfect hourglass form, it is what society has demanded of her for years. It is what the world around her has told her she must be, a reflection of wealth, status, and beauty. But as she stands there, watching herself in the mirror, you sense the weight of that expectation pressing down on her, heavier than the corset ever was. It is not just the discomfort of the corset that troubles her, it is the endless, suffocating pressure to conform, the pressure to be beautiful, to meet an ideal that is never truly hers, but one she has been taught to chase from the moment she first learned the meaning of a perfect waist. The desire to fit into the shape of society's dreams, to wear the mantle of beauty that promises so much wealth, power, respect, is so strong that it overshadows everything else. She breathes in deeply, her chest rising as she holds herself, if only for a moment, as the ideal woman the world expects. The corset has left its mark on her body, yes. The tight grip, the constriction, the endless adjustments to squeeze herself into a shape that was never truly meant for her. But it has also left a deeper scar, one that runs beneath the surface, into her very psyche, into the heart of who she believes she must be. Her body is no longer just her own. It is a canvas for the world to paint upon. Every curve, every line, every breath, shaped and molded by expectations she has lived by for as long as she can remember. You see her hands move slowly, with deliberate care, as if she is tracing the contours of her own life, tracing the marks left by society's gaze. The pressure to conform is a constant companion, always there, always pushing her to be more, to be better, to be flawless. She lifts her chin just slightly, her reflection staring back at her with a mix of resignation and expectation. Her gaze moves downward, and you see it in her eyes, the awareness of her own body, the way it feels beneath her fingers, beneath her touch. It's not just the corset that has shaped her. It's the gaze of the world, the judgments of society, the unspoken rules that dictate how a woman should look, how she should behave, and how she should feel. And it is in that moment, as she stands before the mirror, that you begin to understand the true cost of that pressure. The corset, the tight waist, the hourglass silhouette, they are not just symbols of beauty. They are symbols of power, of wealth, of status. The tighter the corset, the smaller the waist, the greater the respect, the more the admiration. And with that admiration comes everything she has been told she needs. The respect of her peers, the deference of men, the envy of other women. But it's not just her physical appearance that defines her in this world. It is the performance of it. It is the careful dance of fitting into the mold, of becoming the woman everyone expects her to be. And so, she continues to conform, to bend, to reshape herself, because the alternative is too great to bear. The weight of rejection, of being seen as lesser, of failing to meet the standards set by society, these are the things she fears most. You see her turn away from the mirror, her fingers still lingering along the edges of her gown, as though she's trying to hold on to some small piece of herself. The weight of her body feels heavier now, not from the corset, but from the realization that her worth, her identity, has been tied to a standard she never chose. The pressure to conform has consumed her, shaped her, and she has willingly submitted to it because she was taught that this was the way to survive. This was the way to be seen, to be admired, to be valued. She takes a step, and then another, moving with the same controlled grace. But now there is something different in her gait. It's almost imperceptible, but it's there. The faintest stumble, the smallest hesitation, as though the weight of her own expectations has become too much to bear. She reaches the door, her fingers brushing against the wood, and stops. She doesn't turn to look at you, she doesn't need to. The unspoken truth hangs in the air between you, thick and undeniable. The corset, the gown, the beauty, it is all a mask. A mask that she wears to fit into a world that has taught her that beauty is the key to everything. It is the key to status, to respect, to love. But what happens when that mask becomes too tight? What happens when it becomes impossible to breathe, to move, to exist without it? You see her stand still, her back stiff, her posture perfect, but there is no joy in it. There is no ease, only the quiet realization that she has spent her entire life living for others, living to meet an ideal that was never hers to begin with. She is beautiful, yes, but she is also trapped in a world where her worth is measured by a standard that is impossible to meet, a standard that was never meant to define her. And in that moment, you begin to see the true cost of the corset, the true cost of beauty, the true cost of conformity. It is not just the pain, the discomfort, the physical strain, it is the cost of a life spent trying to be something she was never meant to be. A life spent living for the approval of others, for the admiration of a world that values appearance over all else. She stands there, the weight of it all pressing down on her, and you see it, the faintest flicker of something beneath her perfect exterior. It is not regret. It is not bitterness. It is simply the quiet, painful truth that she has been living in a world that values her appearance more than her well-being, more than her happiness. As she turns away and walks out of the room, you're left with that truth. The corset is gone, but the pressure remains, heavy and unrelenting. The weight of perfection, of beauty, of expectation, it is a burden she carries. A burden every woman who has ever lived beneath society's gaze must bear. And so, she walks on, her every step measured, her every breath controlled, but beneath it all, you sense the quiet longing for freedom, the longing to shed the mask, to be seen for who she truly is, not as a reflection of the world's expectations, but as a woman who deserves to breathe freely. The room is bathed in the soft glow of candlelight, its flickering shadows stretching across the walls like ghosts of another time. Outside, the world is quiet, the distant hum of evening muffled by the thick stone walls. Inside, the silence is palpable, a heavy stillness that seems to hold its breath, as though waiting for something to shift. And then, you see her. She stands before the full-length mirror, the same one that has seen her transform time and time again. Her reflection stares back at her, calm, composed, beautiful. But something about it feels different tonight. Something about the way she holds herself, the way her posture is perfectly straight, shoulders pulled back, chest high. It's as though she is performing for the reflection that has become a measure of her worth, of her value in the world. She is, once again, the perfect image of feminine beauty, a vision of the coveted Victorian hourglass figure that society has demanded of her. Her waist is impossibly narrow, cinched so tightly that it almost seems as if the corset, which she has worn for years, is a second skin, a necessary extension of her body. The curves of her hips and bust are exaggerated, perfectly shaped to fit the ideal that society holds up as the pinnacle of womanhood. But behind the facade, behind the tight bodice and carefully constructed silhouette, you can see the strain, the subtle tension in her body, the way her shoulders hold a little too much weight, the way her hands tremble slightly as they adjust the lace at her waist. You can sense the discomfort she hides beneath her poised exterior. The corset, which has been a constant companion throughout her life, is not just a garment, it is a cage that shapes her body, but also imprisons her health, her comfort, her very sense of self. You watch as she exhales slowly, the breath shallow, not from exertion, but from the tight grip of the corset that restricts her lungs, compresses her ribs, and makes every movement a calculated effort. Her breathing is shallow, uneven, as if the very act of inhaling has become a luxury she can no longer afford. And you see the subtle yet unmistakable strain in her expression, the faint furrow between her brows, the brief flicker of discomfort as she shifts her weight ever so slightly. The woman who stands before the mirror is the epitome of the Victorian ideal, beautiful, graceful, poised. But beneath the surface, you feel the silent cost of that beauty. The hourglass figure, once a symbol of perfection, has become a prison. And the corset, once a tool of elegance, has become a source of pain, of trauma, of physical and emotional suffering. You begin to realize that this figure, the one she has spent years cultivating, the one that society has demanded, was never meant to exist. It is an illusion, a shape that does not align with the natural flow of the human body. The narrow waist, the exaggerated hips, the lifted bust, these are the marks of a beauty that cannot be sustained. They are the result of an impossible standard that asks women to contort their bodies into a shape that defies nature, that defies comfort, that defies health. You watch her as she steps away from the mirror, her movements slow, deliberate, as though she is afraid to move too quickly, afraid to disrupt the delicate balance she has created. She reaches for the edge of the chair, her fingers gripping it tightly as she lowers herself into the seat. But the moment she sits, you see the subtle wince, the discomfort that flashes across her face. It is the same discomfort she has learned to live with, the same ache in her ribs, in her back, in her waist, that has been with her for so long. The corset, which she has worn for years, has left its mark on her body, and now, even when it is removed, she is still bound by its legacy. The hourglass shape, the beauty that everyone admires, is a form that comes at a price. It is not just the compression, the physical restrictions of the corset, it is the slow, insidious damage that is done to her body over time. The corset, designed to shape her into a figure of perfection, has also shaped her body in ways that have long-lasting effects on her health. You can see the strain in her posture, the way her back arches slightly, the tension in her shoulders, the way she moves as if each step requires more energy than it should. The corset has forced her spine into unnatural positions, compressing her internal organs and restricting her ability to move freely. The tight lacing has pushed her ribs inward, restricted her diaphragm, and made every breath an effort. Her lungs, starved for space, have learned to adapt, to survive beneath the constriction, but it has come at a cost. The hourglass figure, once the pinnacle of feminine beauty, has become a symbol of her suffering. The corset has shaped her body into an image of perfection, but that image is unsustainable. It is unnatural. It is a form that demands more from her than her body was ever meant to give. And as she sits there now, the weight of that realization settles over her, just as the weight of the corset once did. You can see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weariness that is not just physical, but mental, emotional. The pressure to conform to this ideal, this impossible ideal, has worn her down. The desire to be beautiful, to be admired, to fit into the shape that society has decided is worthy of respect, has become all-consuming. But in the pursuit of that perfection, she has lost something far more valuable: her health, her well-being, her comfort. The desire to achieve the perfect hourglass figure has led her down a path of increasing discomfort, of ever-tightening corsets, of years spent bending, twisting, contorting her body into a shape that was never meant for it. She has sacrificed her health in pursuit of beauty, and now she feels the cost in every movement, in every breath, in every moment of her life. The woman you watch before the mirror, the woman who is so perfectly shaped, is also a woman who has been shaped by society's expectations. She is a woman whose worth has been determined by the size of her waist, the curve of her hips, the lift of her bust. But now, as she sits there, exhausted, you see the truth. The corset, the hourglass figure, the beauty, these are not just physical attributes. They are symbols of a world that values appearance above all else. A world that asks women to sacrifice their health, their comfort, their very lives. In the pursuit of perfection, she looks down at her waist, her fingers grazing the delicate fabric of her gown, and you see the quiet sorrow in her expression. The corset is gone, but its effects remain, etched into her body, etched into her mind. The pursuit of the perfect figure has cost her more than just comfort. It has cost her the ability to live freely in her own body. And as you watch her sit there, her body stiff and tired, you understand something deep and painful. The corset, the hourglass shape, the beauty, these are not just physical ideals. They are prisons. They are cages that women have learned to live in and that they continue to wear even when the corset is removed. The hourglass shape may be beautiful, but it is a beauty that comes at a terrible cost. And that cost is a price women have paid and continue to pay in the name of perfection. The night was quieter than most, the fire in the hearth barely aglow as the room settled into an unnatural stillness. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, its soft murmur almost lost beneath the heavy silence that had taken over the chamber. Inside, you find her once again standing before the mirror, as she always did, her gaze steady but distant, a quiet unease flickering behind her eyes. Tonight, she's different. You notice it in the way she moves slower, more deliberate. The fine lace of her gown trails behind her as she turns, the soft rustle of fabric blending with the quiet stillness of the room. She seems heavier somehow, though she wears her pregnancy like a delicate secret beneath the fine layers of silk. It's as if the weight of it, of the life she carries, has become too much to hold within the confines of her own body, as though the corset, which she once wore so effortlessly, now presses against her in a way that no longer feels comfortable. You can see the faint flush of her skin, the glow of pregnancy that hasn't quite yet reached the fullness of its term. But beneath the surface, something stirs a discomfort that runs deeper than the soft weight of her growing belly. Her hands hover lightly over her abdomen, fingers brushing against the delicate swell. But there is something in the way she moves, something in the way her breath catches in her chest, that tells you this moment is not as serene as it appears. She adjusts the corset one last time, tightening it carefully, too carefully. The fabric, still so familiar, still so tight, wraps around her middle like an old friend, like something she knows all too well. The constriction, the familiar pressure against her ribs and waist, feels almost natural to her now. The idea of her body without it feels foreign, incomplete. And yet, as she pulls the laces just a little tighter, you see the faintest wince. It's subtle, almost imperceptible, but it's there, a moment of discomfort that echoes something much deeper. You stand quietly, observing, as she turns from the mirror, reaching for a chair to steady herself. She sits carefully, her movements slow and measured, as if afraid that one wrong move might bring with it some unknown consequence. Her hand rests lightly on her abdomen again, but this time, there's something else in her eyes, a flicker of doubt, of fear. The corset's grip, once a tool of beauty, of elegance, now feels like a shackle. And deep down, she knows this truth. The very thing she's worn to shape herself, to shape her status, may now be the very thing that threatens what she holds most dear. Her pregnancy, once a cause for celebration, now carries with it a quiet, looming anxiety. The corset's constriction, so much a part of her daily routine, presses against her abdomen, restricting the space meant to nourish the child she carries. You know what she knows deep down, that the pressure it places on her growing belly can have dire consequences. The tightness, the way it compresses her internal organs, limits blood flow, restricts the movement of oxygen and nutrients, the very things needed to sustain the life inside her. But despite these dangers, she wears it, because society demands it. The corset, the symbol of beauty and elegance, cannot be removed, not now, not in a world that judges a woman's worth by her appearance. She stands again, this time more cautiously, her hand resting against the bedpost for support. You can see the tension in her face, the faint furrow in her brow. She takes a slow step forward, then another, each one more labored than the last. The weight of the corset, of her growing belly, presses against her chest, making it harder to breathe, harder to move with the ease she once had. She pauses, her fingers briefly touching her abdomen again, as if checking for some sign that everything is still okay, still safe. But even as she stands there, you can feel it, the quiet desperation, the fear. She knows the risks. She knows the dangers that come with wearing the corset while pregnant, but she does not know how to live without it. The social pressure to maintain her appearance, to conform to the expectations of beauty, is too great. The corset has become a part of her, an essential piece of the world she inhabits. And despite the pain, despite the discomfort, she continues to wear it, because that is what society demands of her. As the evening drifts on, she moves to sit by the window, her hands still resting gently on her abdomen. The moonlight spills across the room, casting soft silver light on her face, but she doesn't seem to notice. Her gaze is distant, lost somewhere beyond the window, as if searching for something, some answer some reassurance that her child is still safe, still thriving inside her. But the answer is elusive, hidden behind the veil of her own fear. You know what? She cannot say what no one can say aloud, that the corset, that beautiful, constricting garment that has shaped her body for years, now poses a threat to her child. The tightness around her waist, the restriction of her breath, the pressure on her organs, all of it carries risks she cannot ignore. Miscarriages, stillbirths, complications during childbirth, these are the hidden dangers of the corset. And though the woman sitting before you may look serene, beautiful, composed, she is anything but. Her body, though outwardly perfect, is under siege. The life inside her, the life she holds so dearly, is at risk. You see her glance down again, her fingers pressing more firmly against her abdomen this time. Her expression clouded with concern. She shifts slightly in her seat, as though trying to find a more comfortable position, but the corset remains tight, unforgiving, relentless. She tries to take a deep breath, but it comes out shallow, constrained. The very act of breathing, once natural, now feels like an effort, something she must force, something that must be measured in order to fit within the confines of the corset's grip. And then, there it is, the unmistakable sign that something is wrong. The sharp cramp that tenses her entire body, the sudden pain that radiates across her abdomen. It is brief, but it is enough. Enough to send a wave of fear through her. Enough to remind her of the fragile line she walks. The line between life and loss. The tightness of the corset, the pressure it exerts on her abdomen, has caused the blood flow to her uterus to slow, to weaken. The oxygen and nutrients that should be nourishing her child are no longer flowing as they should. And for a moment, she is paralyzed by the thought, what if it's too late? What if the damage has already been done? She stands quickly, a sharp intake of breath as the pain subsides, but it lingers. A quiet reminder of the danger she faces. She walks across the room, each step slow and careful, her hand still resting on her abdomen, her fingers lightly pressing as though trying to reassure herself that everything is still okay. But she knows. She knows the risks. She knows the damage the corset has done. She knows that the pressure it has placed on her body, on her growing child, cannot be undone. You watch as she reaches the door, her back straight, her posture perfect as always. But there is no grace in her movements now. There is only fear, only the quiet, desperate wish that she can make it through the night without further harm. The corset has always been a part of her, always been something she wore to enhance her beauty, to fit the mold society has created for her. But now, as she stands there, looking out into the quiet night, she knows the truth. The corset, the very thing that has defined her beauty, has also become the very thing that threatens her future, her health, and the life of the child she carries. The weight of it presses down on her, a silent, unspoken burden that she can no longer ignore. And as she stands there, the cool breeze from the window brushing against her skin, you realize just how fragile the balance is. Beauty and danger, comfort and risk, they have always been intertwined for her. And now, as she faces the quiet terror of the unknown, she must decide what matters more: the corset that has shaped her, or the life that now grows within her. And in the silence of the room, you understand something painful, something undeniable. The corset, once a symbol of beauty and grace, has become a silent danger, one that threatens not just the body, but the very future of the woman who has lived her entire life beneath its grip. It's early morning, just before the sun's first light breaks through the horizon, casting long shadows across the room. The silence in the chamber is thick, almost suffocating. The air is still, heavy with the weight of anticipation, and the quiet, steady breath of someone on the edge of something both painful and inevitable. You stand in the corner, watching her as she moves slowly across the room. She is dressed simply now. No more finery, no more corsets, but you can still see the remnants of her former form, her posture stiff, her back straight as if to remind her body that it must remain elegant, even now. Her belly, round and heavy with the child she carries, sits before her like a silent, undeniable reminder of the life she has brought into the world. But tonight, there is no joy in the fullness of her pregnancy. Instead, there is fear, a fear that she hides behind a composed expression, behind the practiced elegance that has defined her for so many years. The corset, which once molded her into the perfect shape, now feels like a distant memory, an old companion she has shed. But its legacy, its lasting effects on her body are still very much present. And tonight, they feel heavier than ever. You watch as she shifts, her hand resting gently on her abdomen. But this time there is something more than the usual tenderness in her touch. There is a tremor, a subtle hesitation as her fingers press against her skin. You can see the discomfort in the way she moves, in the way she hesitates before taking another step. The tension in her shoulders, the slow, calculated movements, these are the signs of a woman who knows that her body, which has borne the weight of the corset for so long, is no longer as resilient as it once was. Her breath is shallow, uneven, and she pauses for a moment, glancing down at her swollen belly. You can sense her anxiety, the quiet worry gnawing at her mind. Her thoughts, though unspoken, are clear. Will my body be able to do this? Will it bend? Will it move? Will it open for what is to come? For years, she wore the corset with pride, shaping herself into the ideal woman, perfectly molded, perfectly poised. But what no one told her, what no one spoke of in hushed courtrooms or delicate parlors, was the price she would pay when it came time to bring life into the world. The corset had not just shaped her waist, it had shaped her pelvis, her internal organs, her very bones. And now, as she stands here, her body, once a vessel of beauty, is a battlefield, one where the consequences of years of constriction are beginning to make themselves known. You see her take a step forward, a subtle grimace crossing her face, the weight of her child pulling at her. But the strain on her body, the compression of her pelvis, is undeniable. The corset had reshaped her waist, narrowed her hips, and though it had been designed to create the perfect hourglass figure, it had done so at a great cost. The pressure it placed on her pelvis, on her internal organs, has left scars beneath the surface. Scars that are only now beginning to reveal themselves in the most dangerous way. As she reaches the bed, she pauses again, a moment of quiet, her hand resting lightly on the side of her belly. Her breath hitches. She shifts uncomfortably, and you see her try to steady herself, her body responding to the tightness, the pressure, the undeniable discomfort that has been building beneath the surface. You see the subtle arch of her back, the stiffness in her posture that suggests something deeper, something more troubling. You've watched her move gracefully through life, bearing the weight of societal expectations with elegance and poise. But now, as she prepares to bring new life into the world, you understand the cost of that grace. The corset, which had once been her constant companion, has left its mark on her body. And now, as she stands on the precipice of childbirth, she finds herself unprepared for the toll it has taken. As her contractions begin, you can feel the tension in the room, in the very air around her. Each breath she takes is a laborious effort, her chest rising and falling with slow, measured movements. The child within her stirs, the promise of life pressing forward, but the woman's body is struggling to keep up. Her pelvis, compressed by years of tight lacing, is no longer the flexible, open structure it was meant to be. The corset has altered her bones, her muscles, her very capacity to bear the weight of childbirth. You watch her closely as the first wave of pain hits. Her back arches slightly, and she places a hand over her abdomen, her fingers pressing into the fabric of her gown as if trying to hold on to something solid, something unmovable. But the pain only intensifies. Her breath comes in short gasps, her face contorting as her body responds to the pressure, the weight of the child, the force of the contractions. And you know deep down that the corset, the years of constriction, have made this moment infinitely more difficult than it needed to be. The narrowness of her waist, the compressed state of her pelvis, has made it nearly impossible for her to open fully. Her body, which has been shaped into the ideal feminine form, is now locked in that form, unable to expand, unable to accommodate the life within her. Her labor drags on, longer than it should, and you can see the strain in her eyes. The pain, the discomfort, the exhaustion, it's all compounded by the knowledge that her body is fighting against itself. The corset's pressure on her pelvic region, its constant restriction of her abdomen, has made it harder for her to give birth. The space she needs to open, to allow the child to pass through, is no longer available to her. Her pelvis, once shaped and narrowed by the corset, is now a barrier to her child's arrival. You see the faint beads of sweat on her forehead, the way her hands grip the sides of the bed, the way her body trembles with the effort of each contraction. Her breath is quick and shallow now, her body not allowing her the relief she desperately needs. The air in the room feels thick, suffocating, and the walls seem to close in on her as she struggles against the limits of her own body. The midwife hurries to her side, her hands gentle but firm as she guides the woman through the labor. But even the midwife cannot deny the difficulties that arise from the corset's legacy. The tight, constricted pelvis, the limited space, the years of compression have made what should have been a natural process into something painfully difficult. And then you hear it, a sharp cry, the cry of a newborn entering the world. But the moment is not filled with the joy that one might expect. Instead, there is a quiet tension, a lingering fear in the air. The baby is born, yes, but the complications are far from over. The woman's body, exhausted and strained, does not respond as it should. The tear is deep, painful, and the recovery will be long. You watch as the midwife works quickly, trying to repair the damage, but you know it's more than just physical. The scar of the corset, the scars left by years of pressure, will remain with this woman forever. The shape she has molded herself into for the sake of beauty and societal expectations has left her unable to fully embrace the natural process of childbirth. And though the baby is here safe, healthy, the cost of this moment will linger long after the pain has faded. As the room settles into a quieter rhythm, you see the woman, her eyes closed, her face pale with exhaustion. But there is something else there too, a quiet, subtle regret. The corset, which had once been her shield, her symbol of beauty, has become the very thing that hindered her ability to give life. The ideal she had spent her life striving to meet has cost her more than she ever could have imagined. She holds her child now, cradling the tiny, fragile life in her arms, but you see the weight in her expression. The quiet understanding that the corset's grip on her body has left its mark not just on her figure, but on her ability to bring forth life. Her body, once a canvas of beauty, is now a canvas of scars, physical, emotional, and unseen. The corset, once a symbol of status, has become a symbol of sacrifice. And though the child in her arms is a symbol of life, of new beginnings, it is also a reminder of the price that has been paid, of the toll that beauty, conformity, and expectation have taken on her body. In the quiet of the room, you understand this. The corset's legacy is not just the shape it creates, it is the harm it causes, the pain it inflicts, the obstacles it places in the path of natural life. And as she holds her child, the woman is left to wonder, was the cost of perfection ever truly worth it? It is a quiet afternoon when you find her in front of the mirror once again, but this time the scene feels different. The reflection that stares back at her is no longer the meticulously controlled image of a woman shaped by corsets and constriction. This time, her figure is less rigid, less bound by the pressure of tight lacing. There is no corset wrapping around her waist, no external force pulling her body into an idealized shape. The air around her seems lighter, freer, as though she is breathing in a world that is beginning to change, beginning to open up to new possibilities. She stands there, her posture more relaxed than it has been in years. The lines of her body, once so carefully sculpted by hours of wear and strain, now fall naturally, without the tight grip of the corset to force them into place. There's a softness in the way her shoulders settle, a quiet ease that you've not seen before. The tightness in her chest, once an ever-present companion, seems to have loosened. The air she breathes now fills her lungs more fully than it ever did beneath the tight confinement of her corset. You notice the change in her expression too. The lines of tension around her eyes, the subtle clench of her jaw, the tightness in her hands, they have all softened. She stands in front of the mirror, not with the usual sense of measured grace, but with a quiet confidence that comes from freedom. She inhales deeply, the fullness of her breath filling the room. For the first time in a long time, she seems to be allowing herself the luxury of simply being, not sculpting, not adjusting, not performing for an ideal that no longer holds the same power over her. The change is subtle but undeniable. The corset, the symbol of her status, her beauty, her very worth, has been set aside. It lies in the corner of the room, forgotten for the moment, as she stands in a simpler gown that flows more freely, allowing her body to move with ease. It is a far cry from the rigid garments she once wore, the stiffened bodices and tightly laced waists that seemed to define her identity for so long. Now she wears something softer, more forgiving, and it shows in the way she carries herself without the weight of a constricting past pressing down on her shoulders. You can feel the shift in the room, in the very air around her. It is not just a change in clothing, but a change in attitude. The weight of societal expectations, of centuries of enforced beauty standards, has not yet completely faded, but it is beginning to loosen its grip. You can sense that she is beginning to question the value of the corset, not just as a symbol of beauty, but as a symbol of something more insidious, something that has shaped her body, her life, and her sense of self in ways she had never fully understood until now. The corset's decline did not happen overnight, and it was not without its struggles. But, like the softest of winds shifting the course of a river, the changing currents of time, medical knowledge, and evolving fashion have begun to reshape the landscape. The same woman who once embraced the rigid hourglass figure, who once had to embody it, who felt that her worth was tied to it now, stands in front of you, free from the shackles of the past. Her gaze, once focused on perfection and external approval, now seems to rest on something else, something deeper. You sense that she has heard the whispers of change, the voices of women who have begun to speak out, to question the validity of the corset's grip on their lives. You can feel the growing awareness that this garment, once seen as essential for beauty, has exacted a terrible toll on their bodies, on their health, their well-being, and their very sense of freedom. She moves to the window, her steps lighter, freer than they have been in years. The breeze outside tugs at the curtains, and you watch as she takes a deep breath, her chest expanding as though she has only just remembered what it feels like to fill her lungs fully. The air seems fresh now, not just outside, but within her own body, a body that has been shaped by the corset. Yes, but now slowly finding its own shape once again. She looks out into the garden, the sunlight filtering through the trees, and you can sense the change in her, no longer bound by the tyranny of laces and stays, no longer a prisoner to the ideal that has held her captive for so long. The change she feels inside of herself is not just a physical one. It is deeper, more profound. It is the realization that her body is not simply a vessel for fashion, a form to be molded and shaped for the approval of others. She is no longer just a reflection of the ideals that have been projected onto her. She is a woman, whole and free, And for the first time, she can see herself outside the narrow lens of perfection. As she stands there, in the sunlight, her hand resting gently on her waist, no longer cinched tight by the corset, you can see her thoughts unfolding. The world around her has begun to shift, to open up, and the pressure to conform is beginning to recede. The rise of medical knowledge, the growing awareness of the harm caused by corsetry, has given her the space to breathe, to live more fully, to make choices about her own body that are no longer dictated by the demands of beauty and fashion. In the distance, you can hear the soft hum of a world changing. The corset is no longer the icon of feminine beauty it once was. The rise of looser, more comfortable clothing is taking its place, offering women a new form of expression, a new way of being in the world. The hourglass figure, once the pinnacle of femininity, has begun to fade into the background as women embrace more practical, more comfortable styles of dress that allow their bodies to move freely, to breathe without the weight of constriction. She has heard the voices of those who came before her, the women who fought for their right to live without the pressure of the corset, who questioned the cost of beauty and sought freedom for their bodies. She has seen the women who have embraced these changes, who wear looser gowns, who walk with a different kind of grace, a grace not shaped by tight lacing, but by freedom. And as she stands there, bathed in the soft light of the morning, you see it. The dawning realization that she no longer needs to wear the corset, to conform to the ideal of the past, to carry the weight of perfection. It is a quiet victory, one that has been fought for by countless women, and one that she is finally embracing. The corset, once an emblem of beauty, is now a relic of a past era, its grip on her body loosening with each passing day, each new step she takes toward freedom. You watch as she walks across the room, her movements fluid, natural. She has shed more than just the corset. She has shed the limitations it imposed on her, the restrictions it placed on her body, and the expectations it carved into her soul. The world around her is changing, and she is changing with it. She is not just embracing a new fashion, she is embracing a new way of being. A way that honors her body for what it is, not for how it conforms to some arbitrary ideal. The breeze outside picks up, the curtains billowing slightly, and as she stands there, you know that she has found something that was once lost, something that cannot be measured in inches or waistlines or the number of stays in a corset. She has found herself, and for the first time, she is free. The corset, once the measure of a woman's beauty, is now a thing of the past. And as the sunlight streams through the window, illuminating the room, you see her no longer bound by the past, no longer a prisoner to society's expectations. She is simply a woman, breathing freely in the world, walking forward into a future of her own making. It's late afternoon when you find her again, standing by the large window of her chamber. The soft golden light of the setting sun spills across the room, casting long, slender shadows that stretch toward the floor. The air is cool, yet she stands still, gazing out at the world beyond the window with an intensity that belies the quiet of the moment. You can see the soft glow of her skin, the smooth curve of her figure, and yet there is something different tonight, something beneath the surface. Her hands rest gently on her waist, but you can feel it, that hidden tension. The corset, the very thing that had once defined her beauty, is long gone, yet its weight remains, not on her body, but in her mind, in her heart. The memories of tight lacing, of constricted breaths, of hours spent wrapped in an ironclad shape, all lingering like a shadow that never truly fades. You watch her closely, her reflection in the glass as she looks out, but her gaze is distant, lost in the swirl of her thoughts. She is still, but there is a quiet struggle in the air, something unspoken, the pressure of conformity, the very thing she had been raised with, the idea that beauty was the key to everything. to acceptance, to love, to worth still grips her. Though it is no longer a physical bind, the corset, which had once molded her into the ideal form of womanhood, is now a thing of the past. The marks on her body from years of wear have faded, but the echoes of those days, of the pain and the sacrifice, remain. She has stepped away from it, yes, but the emotional toll of what it took to conform to society's standards still sits heavy on her chest. You see her lift her hand to her waist once more, not in discomfort, but in quiet recognition of what the corset had cost her. The hours of tight lacing, the long, slow hours of breathless conformity, the bending and twisting of her body into unnatural shapes, each moment had been a sacrifice. A small one at first, but over time, they had added up. The cost of beauty, of being the ideal woman, had been much higher than she had ever anticipated. Her fingers traced the faint outlines of her ribs, as though feeling for the shape that the corset had forced upon her, the way it had compressed her lungs and limited her breath. You can see it in the way her shoulders tense, just slightly, as though she is remembering the days when even the simplest movement had been a battle against the tightness around her waist. The corset had defined her body, but it had also restricted it. She had lived in its confines for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to breathe freely, to move without the ever-present pressure. But tonight, as she stands there, you realize something deeper than the physical marks. It is the emotional cost, the toll that the constant need to fit into a specific ideal had taken on her. The pressure to be beautiful, to be admired, to meet society's standards, had come at the cost of her own well-being. She had endured physical pain, pain that became so familiar to her that she no longer questioned it. She had endured emotional strain, the constant self-monitoring, the worrying about every inch of her body, the measuring of her worth by her appearance. And she had endured reproductive health risks, silent dangers that she had never fully understood until it was too late. The tightness of the corset had compressed not just her waist, but her organs, restricting the very flow of blood and air that her body needed. The corset had reshaped her body, yes, but it had also reshaped her life, her ability to move, to breathe, to even function without the constant reminder of the price she had paid for beauty. But now, as she stands here, freed from the corset's physical grip, she realizes that the emotional and psychological scars still linger. The cost of beauty was not just the pain she had endured, but the toll it had taken on her sense of self. She had sacrificed so much to meet an ideal that was never truly hers to fulfill. The corset had not only constrained her body, but it had also confined her mind, trapping her in a cycle of self-doubt, of striving for something that could never be reached. Her gaze drifts to her reflection again, but this time, there is a quiet sadness in her eyes. She is beautiful, yes, perfect, by society's standards. But she has learned, in the quiet moments like this, that beauty is a fragile thing, a thing that can be constructed, but also deconstructed. The corset had been her tool to create that beauty, to meet the expectations placed upon her. But it had come at a cost she had never fully understood until now. She lowers her gaze to her hands, fingers still lightly tracing the shape of her waist. And you can see it now, the quiet realization. The cost of beauty had been high, much higher than she had ever anticipated. The corset had been a symbol of her status, her femininity, her worth, but now it was a reminder of the sacrifices she had made, the sacrifices of her health, her comfort, and her very sense of self. And despite the harm it had caused, despite the physical trauma and emotional strain, the corset had remained a symbol of femininity, a symbol of grace. In the eyes of so many, it had been a tool of beauty and status, and she had worn it with pride, believing that it was what society expected of her. But now, as she stands before the mirror, there is no pride in her reflection. There is only the quiet acknowledgement that the price she paid for that beauty was too great, and that beauty, true beauty, is not something that can be shaped or constrained. It is something that must come from within, something that must be allowed to breathe freely, without the weight of society's expectations pressing down on it. She takes a slow breath, and for the first time in years, she feels the full, unimpeded expansion of her lung. She moves her shoulders gently, rolling them back, and the tension in her body begins to ease. The weight of the corset's influence, the weight of the expectation to conform, begins to lift. She stands straighter now, her back no longer rigid, no longer held in place by an invisible force. You can see the change in her, the way her posture has softened, the way her eyes have softened. She is no longer the woman who defines herself by the corset's shape. She is no longer the woman who measures her worth by the smallness of her waist or the curve of her hips. She is more than that now. She is free. The reflection that stares back at her is no longer one of perfection, but one of peace. The corset may have once symbolized her beauty, her femininity, but now it symbolizes the cost of perfection, a price that is too high for anyone to pay. And as she stands there, looking at herself in the mirror, you realize that she has finally come to understand this truth. Beauty is not the price we pay for acceptance. It is not something to be confined, to be shaped and molded to fit the world's standards. Beauty is something that must come from within, something that must be allowed to breathe freely, without the weight of external expectations holding it down. She takes one final look in the mirror, and for the first time, she smiles, not the practiced smile of a woman who has learned to meet society's demands, but a genuine smile, one that comes from a place of self-recognition, self-acceptance. She has shed the corset, yes, but she has also shed the shackles of perfection. The beauty she holds now is the beauty of freedom, the beauty of a woman who has learned to breathe without constraint. As she walks away from the mirror, her steps light, her breath easy, you know this is only the beginning. The cost of beauty was high, but she has paid it, and now she is free to live in a way that honors her body, her mind, and her soul. The corset may have shaped her once, but now it is no longer what defines her. It is the kind of evening that feels suspended in time, the soft glow of the lamps casting long, warm shadows against the walls. The room is quiet, too quiet, as if the space itself holds its breath. You stand by the window, watching the last vestiges of daylight slip behind the horizon. The world outside feels distant, muted, as if the noise of the day has been swallowed by the stillness of the night. Inside, the silence is thick with something else, a memory, a weight that never quite fades. She is standing near the mirror again, her reflection staring back at her. But there is something different tonight, something that feels heavier than it should. You watch as she adjusts the gown she wears, the fabric soft and flowing, contrasting with the rigid corset she once wore with such pride. There is no corset tonight, its constricting grip has long been left behind. But still, you see the faintest echo of it in her eyes, in the careful way she straightens her posture, in the way she tucks her shoulders back just so, as though some invisible force still compels her to meet the ideal. It's subtle, but it's there. The quiet shadow of perfection, the way her body shifts into position, the posture that demands composure, the way she carries herself as if every inch of her is measured and calculated, even without the corset pressing at her waist. You can see it in the tension in her neck, the stiff alignment of her back, the way she draws in a breath controlled, measured as if she is still bound by the same invisible threads that once held her captive. The corset may have fallen out of fashion long ago, but its legacy lingers in the spaces between breaths, in the silent demands of conformity that still echo through the world. It's not the tight laces or the constricting fabric that shapes her now, it's something deeper. It's the echo of those years spent living beneath the weight of beauty standards that had no mercy, no compassion for the cost they exacted. She stands in front of the mirror, her fingers lightly touching the fabric of her dress, smoothing it with the same delicate care that she once paid to adjusting the laces of her corset. The room seems stiller now, the air thicker with the weight of what she is beginning to understand. The corset, once a symbol of beauty and status, has left its mark not just on her body, but on her mind, on her heart, and on the way she has come to see herself in this world. You know the truth, the one she has only begun to face, that the corset was never just a garment. It was a tool used to mold her body, to force it into a shape that society demanded. And though that tool has been discarded, its legacy persists in the subtle, often invisible ways women are still told to shape their bodies, to conform, to fit into the ever-narrowing ideals of beauty that define worth in this world. The corset may no longer be physically worn, but the pressure to conform to certain body ideals, to meet an impossible standard, has not gone away. It has only shifted, adapted, taken on new forms, more insidious and pervasive. You see it in the way women still strive to be smaller, slimmer, more perfect, in ways that echo the ideals once imposed by the corset. The legacy of the corset lives on in the fashion trends that demand impossible body shapes, in the diet culture that whispers the constant refrain of not enough, in the beauty standards that value appearance above all else. She breathes in deeply again, the air filling her lungs in a way that feels foreign after so many years of constriction. But even now, you can sense the tension beneath her breath, the way she fights against the urge to hold herself in, to shrink her body down to the measurements of the ideal. It's almost as if the space she takes up in the room is too much, too visible, too defiant of the standards that have shaped her life for so long. You watch her with quiet understanding. She has come so far, has shed so much of the weight of the past, but the echoes of those years spent in the tight grip of societal expectations are hard to ignore. The corset's physical form may be gone, but the pressure to conform, to be seen as beautiful, to be admired for the shape of her body, still lingers in the air around her. It lingers in the way she holds herself, in the way she stands perfect, composed, controlled, as if she is still waiting for approval, still waiting for the world to tell her she is enough. The corset, once a symbol of femininity and grace, has become a symbol of something more, a symbol of the sacrifice of health and well-being in the name of beauty. The physical pain, the emotional strain, the reproductive risks, the loss of freedom, the loss of self, they were all hidden beneath the layers of fabric, beneath the lines of lace, beneath the idea that a woman's worth was determined by the shape of her body. But the corset's legacy does not end with its fall from fashion. It is woven into the fabric of today's beauty standards, which still prioritize the appearance of a woman's body over her health, her comfort, her autonomy. Women are still taught to strive for an ideal that is impossible to reach, that is constantly shifting, constantly changing, never enough. It is a legacy of perfection that has shaped the way women see themselves, the way they measure their worth, and the way they live their lives. She moves away from the mirror now, her hand resting lightly on her waist, but the look in her eyes is different this time. It is not the quiet acceptance of beauty as a measure of worth, but the dawning realization that beauty is something much more complicated, much more elusive than a set of measurements or proportions. The corset may have shaped her body, but it did not shape her soul. The ideals of beauty may still linger in the world, but they are no longer the only measure of her worth. As she steps toward the window, her gaze drifting once more to the world beyond, you sense that something has shifted within her. The legacy of the corset, the idea that beauty and worth are tied to the shape of a woman's body, will never fully disappear. But she is beginning to see it for what it truly is, a cage, a constraint, a standard that is both harmful and unattainable. She is no longer the woman who measures her worth by the size of her waist or the curve of her hips. She is no longer the woman who wears herself thin in pursuit of perfection. She is a woman who has learned, at last, to live for herself, not for the expectations placed upon her by society, not for the approval of the world. You watch her, standing by the window, the evening light falling softly around her, and you know this is only the beginning of her journey. The legacy of the corset, the pressure of beauty standards, will still be a part of her world, but she is no longer bound by it. She has shed the corset in more ways than one, and now she stands, free at last, breathing deeply, fully ready to define her own worth, ready to embrace herself for who she truly is, not for who the world tells her to be. As the years passed and the corset eventually fell out of fashion, the whispers of its legacy lingered like the scent of a long-forgotten fragrance. For centuries, the corset had been a symbol of beauty, elegance, and social status, something that women strove to embody, something they wore with pride. It shaped the way they stood, the way they walked, and even the way they breathed. But as time went on, the true cost of that beauty began to surface. The rigid waist, the compressed ribs, the strained breath, these were not mere inconveniences, but signs of a deeper, more painful truth. The corset, for all its allure and symbolism, left a lasting mark on women's bodies and minds. Behind the layers of lace and fabric, beneath the outward grace, there was pain. There was the constant pressure on the organs, the restrictions on movement, and the very real health risks that women faced in the name of an idealized body shape. The corset shaped not only their figures, but their sense of self-worth, their perception of beauty, and ultimately their lives. The body that women worked so hard to perfect was often left broken, strained, and fatigued, its natural functions compromised by the rigid constraints of an unnatural ideal. The psychological toll was just as severe. The societal pressure to conform to a particular image, to embody the perfect figure, took away a woman's freedom not just in her body, but in her spirit. For many, the corset became a symbol of their place in the world, a constant reminder of the price they paid for beauty and status. The psychological strain of fitting into this mold eroded self-esteem, often leaving women to feel like they were only worth the space they occupied or the shape they embodied. The pursuit of perfection through the corset became a never-ending cycle, one where their sense of self was measured against a standard that could never truly be attained. But as we look back on these struggles, we must also look forward. The legacy of the corset reminds us of the importance of challenging the beauty standards that still haunt us today. The world is still filled with pressures that shape women's bodies, pressures to be thinner, taller, more youthful, more flawless. Just like the corset, these standards constrain and distort, causing harm to women's physical and mental health. And yet, it is in our power to challenge them, to rise above the ideals that were never meant to define us. In a world that constantly shifts the lines of beauty, we must find the courage to redefine what it means to be beautiful on our own terms. True beauty, as the story of the corset teaches us, is not something that can be forced into a mold, not something that can be shaped by the expectations of others. It lies in the freedom to embrace who we are, flaws and all. Beauty is in the way we care for our bodies, our minds, and our souls, not in how perfectly we fit into the narrow confines of a societal ideal. As we reflect on the struggles of the women who lived under the corset's oppressive grip, let us remember their resilience. Let us honor their sacrifices, but also honor the lessons they offer us today. The cost of conformity is high, too high. It takes away our health, our well-being, and our sense of self. It leaves us feeling trapped in a body that is not truly ours. So, let us embrace self-love and acceptance. Let us reject the idea that beauty is something we must conform to, and instead, let us celebrate the beauty that comes from within. Let us choose to love our bodies, to honor them for what they are: unique, powerful, and worthy of care, not because they fit into someone else's idea of perfection, but because they are our own. In remembering the legacy of the corset, let us step into a future where we are free to be exactly who we are, without the pressure of society's constraints. Let us break free from the cycle of perfection and, in doing so, reclaim the power of self-love and acceptance for every woman, everywhere.